Honestly, this game had everything you could ask for. It had big leads. It had, big comebacks. And this weird because this feels like a win, Raymond Lucas, but it's not. Rockets fell in this one, but very valiant effort to come back from down 29, nearly beating the Sixers tonight.
Yeah, I loved the fight and I loved the effort. I think it's a big jump for the Rockets even in a loss because it showed that your guy John Wall, he can go get a bucket when you need him to get a bucket, and sometimes you just need that down the stretch. And unfortunately, they dug themselves in a bit of a hole that was too deep, but the fight was definitely there.
And welcome to another episode of The Dream Take presented by The Dream Shake. Michael Brown has the night off. He's been one of about 1 million or 2 or 3 or a whole lot of Houstonians that are without power. So first of all, stay safe, Houston, stay safe, Texas. But Ray and I are coming at you from opposite coasts in the United States, and we're kind of meeting together here, talking Rockets basketball here on this Wednesday evening. So honestly, Ray, coming into tonight, we knew PJ Tucker wasn't playing. We knew Christian Wood was still out. We knew Oladipo was still out. We found out very last minute Eric Gordon was going to play, but this coming in against Philly, who's number 1 in the Eastern Conference, you could almost pencil in the loss right away before the game even really started.
Yeah, I think at halftime I was just looking at the score like, yeah, that feels like what I expected. I don't think I expected it to get out of hand so quickly, though. The second quarter was pretty rough. But, yeah, I think Philly, if Brooklyn's not going to make the finals, I think it's going to be Philadelphia. So that tells you all you need to know about them.
Honestly, tonight, what I learned from tonight is Philly is in trouble. Now, I know Philly did not have Ben Simmons tonight. Looked like Joel Embiid was a little bit not 100%, but Philly had shades of last year's Clippers team. And the one link between those two teams, Doc Rivers. They get complacent when they build large leads. And saw that yet again tonight. The Rockets had no business being back in this game. But let's be real. The reason why the Rockets got back in this game is because Philly, they fell back. They kicked up the chair and just, they just chilled. They coasted through that entire second half. And had they not woken up right at the very end, they could be on an embarrassing side of this comeback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was weird too the way they kind of stalled, because it's not. Sometimes you could see that happen when you have your bench players in a lot, but Seth Curry and Embiid and all those guys, Tobias Harris, they were still on the floor. It was just they took their foot off the gas a little bit too early. Like, you can kind of understand when it's 4 minutes left and maybe it's a 20-point game or something like that. But that was, if I was a Philly fan, I'd be a little nervous about the way that game ended, because if that's how you guys close a game without Ben Simmons on the floor, then that's definitely problematic.
Yeah, and look, the Rockets, they come into tonight, this is a loss for the Rockets. Their 7th straight. Last time the Rockets lost 7 in a row, I had to look this up before the show, January 19th, 2013. That was the first year James Harden was with the Rockets, and the Rockets were a, middle of the road team, and they were the 8th seed that year. So it's been a while since the Rockets have had this bad of a stretch of basketball. The last time they lost 8 in a row was 2001-02, and that year they ended up getting the number 1 pick. So that is yet to be seen. Maybe Friday the fortunes will turn around. But honestly, Philly came into this game and they were hot from 3, and they hit, I think it was 6 threes in the first quarter. They hit 5 of 7, their first 7 threes. They hit 11 by halftime. And everyone kind of came back to the average, came back to the mean here, and they simply just kind of flatlined. And the Rockets took advantage of that. These past 7 games since Christian Wood has been out, there has not been too many positives. In fact, this is probably the biggest positive out of these 7 games is you could see the Rockets play as if, they were fighting for something almost.
Yeah, I think it's we're seeing the adjustment process of what happens when you lose your franchise player, because there's nights when you just don't have it, but that guy can go and kind of drag you out of it. Like everyone could be cold, but then James Harden gets 40, 50, 60, then it's going to be a close win, but I mean, it's still a win regardless. And then you're struggling or you get into a slump. We kind of see these losing streaks that they haven't reached since, I think you said 2013. So yeah, it's definitely a rough adjustment period, to say the least.
Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment period. That's I think a fair, nice word for it.
Yeah.
And honestly, before this comeback, Ray, I don't know about you, but I was saying, you know what? Because we got somewhat of an update from Christian Wood today. Steven Silas talked about it pregame. He said that he's walking around with a bit of a limp. He's doing very light work, and it's still going to be a while until he comes back. And I was reading that. I looked up at my TV screen to see the Rockets down 25, and I'm like, take this team to the shed. Just take them to the shed. We'll see you next year. Maybe we'll have Cade Cunningham next year to, ease the pain a little bit. But honestly, this team, once again, never fails to bring me back out of that. And I'm at least happy with the fact that we have a competitive bunch. If we're going to lose, at least we're going to be competitive about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think? Because I know Mike and I feel like every show we've done the past 2 weeks, Mike and I are, should they quit? Should they keep going? And it's tough to tell because, as you said, Christian Wood's out, but I haven't really heard your opinion on this. Should the Rockets blow this up and just go for next year?
I think it's been interesting because I've been scrolling on Twitter and I've seen a few people adding their input on it. And after watching the first half, obviously they came back, but after watching the first half, it's just like, this is a team that's not really going to be able to compete, especially if all it takes is one guy going down for you guys to fall into such a big slump. So I think tanking it sucks to say because tanking is basically quitting on the season, but when you have the opportunity to go and get a really good young player, like you said, Cade Cunningham, that would be great. And when you have the opportunity to go get a really good young player and then match him with Christian Wood, who's another really good player, it's kind of hard to pass up. And they can fight and they can put forth their best effort, but if it ends in a loss, then that's all it is at the end of the day. You don't get like brownie points, or you're not going to make the playoffs because you lost by 5 instead of 20. So I think definitely tanking might be what this team should do because I don't think they can compete.
Well, yeah. Coming into tonight, the Rockets had I think it was the 6th overall pick. They were the 6th worst record in the league. And if they were to stay in that group, that pick goes to Oklahoma City. So that adds another layer into this. And you're like, oh, well, the only way the Rockets get their pick back is if they're in the top 4.
Yeah.
Which means one of the 4 worst records in the league. And the teams that currently have the top spots, Minnesota, and they're not getting any better. Detroit, Washington, Cleveland, and Orlando. And I'll tell you this, the only team that's as injured as Houston is right now is Orlando. So that is I don't know if Houston's going to be able to crack that bottom 4, honestly. And the thing is, also with this season being the first season the second season, I guess you could say, with the play-in tournament, there's more teams that, will go for a playoff and will compete. And I like that rule because it brings out the best in your team. And even after the loss tonight, even after 7 straight losses, the Rockets are just 2 games back of the 10 seed and 4 games back of the 8 seed with a boatload of ball games to play. So it's weird. I think it's too early still. I still think it's too early, but we're getting closer. Time is ticking.
Yeah.
The backs are against the wall still. Honestly, if from what I heard from Steven Silas say, it's sounding like Christian Wood might. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Christian Wood. I mean, look, Christian Wood should come back as soon as possible if the Rockets are trying to get this going. But there's 2 weeks left until the All-Star break. So if you keep him out for 2 more weeks, you're sitting him 8 more games. I don't know if look, every game the Rockets go into without Christian Wood, they will be an underdog. I think it's safe to say. Now, do I think they're going to lose every one of these 8 games to get a 15-game losing streak up until the All-Star break? I don't think so. I'd like to think the Rockets will win at some point again. And, tonight gave me, at least the end of the game, gave me some kind of hope that they will have a chance to win some of these games coming up. But honestly, like if we get to the All-Star game and the Rockets are, within so let's say they go 2-6 in these next 8 games, just to throw out a number.
Yeah.
That's now you're looking at what they're now 11-17 after the loss tonight. Yeah, so they would be 13-23. So only 10 games under 500 with 36 games to go. I mean, I still wouldn't really put it on it, but we're also getting to the point where the trade deadline comes up. And Victor Oladipo, what are you going to do with him? And, when is Vic going to come back? Because honestly, the Rockets need Christian Wood to come back, but the Rockets also really need Vic to come back so that they can boost his trade value, because Vic's trade value is only depreciating as he continues to ride the bench.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because he's injured and there's not much the Rockets or Vic can really do about it. And they haven't really, have you seen anything, Ray, about Victor Oladipo's status and, where he's coming from? I know he didn't come on the road trip.
I haven't seen any updates about him.
Yeah. So it's, and he's been out. He wasn't even declared doubt. I guess he wasn't doubtful for the game because he wasn't even there. But
I wonder if they're doing kind of what Cleveland's doing with Andre Drummond, where they're kind of just sitting guys out and saying so they don't mess up the trade value by getting hurt or having a string of bad games. But
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard enough about trade rumors. But it's weird because there's not really any updates coming about him.
I'm sure we'll get some kind of update. He'll probably be on the bench on Friday or Saturday, and because they're home now, assuming they'll play on Friday and Saturday, because what's going on in Texas right now is, it's weird because as someone that that used to live in the area, that no longer lives in the area, it's like you feel kind of helpless,
Yeah.
And it sucks. And this is exactly how I felt during the hurricane when it hit 4 years ago. And it's just Houston is it's home, but it's also and it will always be home for me. And it's so sad to see it from my perspective when you just don't have enough to do it with. And you look towards the Rockets to maybe provide some sort of entertainment, some form of excitement, and they're not able to give you that. And that's unfortunate. But hopefully tonight, the Rockets, at least at the end of the game, gave somewhat of a sign of hope that, something better is around the corner. Let's get some questions from the listeners here. Let's kind of take some comments. Rev commenting, shout out Rev. He says, shout out to Tate. Great future for the Rockets. Yes, 100%. Sean Tate, let's talk about him tonight. Ray, let's start us off. Sean Tate played pretty well tonight.
Yeah, his defense is always there. And you really love that from a young player because they're fighting for something. And he's someone who was overlooked in the past, and you can tell he's really grateful for this opportunity with Houston and to be playing in such a big role and playing key minutes, big minutes. That's really big for a young player, and it's really big for his development down the road because let's say Houston turns into a contender within the next couple of years and he's still around, then all of these years and all of these games that he spent playing as a young player, it's kind of molding him into what he can be in the future, and he can give you key minutes. It's like when I compared him to Alex Caruso a little bit earlier in the season, where they're not necessarily the same guy, but they play winning basketball, and their effort is always there on defense, and that's just really great to have because that's not an easy guy to find.
Yeah, and offensively too, he's been really good, especially in these last few games. 19 points tonight, career high, matching career high for Sean Tate. He also has 5 of the last 7 games, or 5 of the last 6 games, he's gone for double digits. So we're starting to see a bit of Sean Tate's offensive game also kind of take shape. I think his 3-point shot is what needs. I wish he wasn't as hesitant on some of the threes that he tries to take. And I wish he would make more of the threes that he takes, but we're starting to see a player like grow in front of our eyes. And it's nice because we get to call him our own, you know, and we don't have to really worry about him, you know, leaving anytime soon or anything like that. So it's really nice. He's been Sean Tate has probably been my favorite part of this season so far, along with Christian Wood. I'm really happy with how Sean Tate has played and watching him kind of grow. Omari agrees. He says Sean Tate, Kevin Porter Jr., Christian Wood, the big 3 of the future. Now, let's talk about this. So Kevin Porter has been playing in the G League, and there are talks about, you know, maybe do the Rockets try to bring him up now? Is this the time? I know how Mike feels, and Mike is very pro let's bring KPJ up. And you know him very well, as we talked about before. How much have you seen of him in the bubble so far, and do you think the Rockets should make the move to bring him up?
I think it's funny because when you watch him in the bubble, it's like he just doesn't belong there when it comes to talent. It's more of a mental thing, which I think plays into whether they should bring him up or not, is if they feel like he's mentally ready to once again be in that NBA situation where things might not go your way. Because in the G League, he's scoring high 20s, 30 easy because that's just the talent he has. But it's not always going to be that easy once you get back to the NBA. So I think they should evaluate him and see if they think that he's ready. But I think he can add a lot immediately to this team, especially on the offensive end, because his scoring is just so creative, whether it's the step backs or the way he can create his own shot off the dribble or driving. He's a special talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing with Kevin Porter is I think when the G League bubble does end and he comes back, I think that between then and the trade deadline is the perfect amount of time to assess whether KPJ can take a good load of minutes away from Victor Oladipo if the team does decide to move on from him. And also just to kind of gauge where he's at. Because right now, I think putting Kevin Porter on this team, all that does is he's not going to take minutes away from Eric Gordon. He's not taking minutes away from Sean Tate. He takes minutes away, honestly, from like Mason Jones. And, you know, Sterling Brown also got hurt tonight. So maybe that is incentive to bring him up. But to me, I think right now, Kevin Porter should stay in the getting made into the system, continue to shed that rust off, because he's been playing really well. Don't get me wrong, but he's also playing really well against G League talent. Yeah. And at this point, like the Rockets, there's no real incentive to keep, to me, there's no real incentive to bring him in. It's going to help you maybe a little bit in the short term, but I think long term you get more benefits with keeping him in the bubble just for a few more weeks. Like, it's only 8 games that they're really going to keep him there. I think after the All-Star break, they're going to bring him back in and he'll end up getting minutes after the All-Star break. So we're only looking at a couple more games before KPJ and KJ Martin as well, who's also been playing really well, will come back, and hopefully we can get some minutes into both of those guys. Let's see if we have any more questions up here. This is a good one. Amari asks, do you guys think David Nwaba should be on this team for the near future? Nwaba played inspired basketball tonight. I think that's a good word for it. Inspired. Defensively, had those 2 big blocks. One was on Dwight Howard, and I can't remember who the second one was on. Do you remember who that second chase down block was on?
It was, I don't remember who it was on, but you're talking about the one later in the game.
Yeah, it was in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was.
Was it on Seth? Maybe it was on Seth Curry.
It was definitely a guard, but I don't remember which guy it was.
Okay, but I mean, this actually brings up a good question. Nwaba is a free agent after the season. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm guaranteeing you, after a game like he played tonight, there are going to be some teams calling the Rockets for David Nwaba. And that raises the question, because also Nwaba is a guy that could take minutes away from Kevin Porter should he come up. Now, I would love for David Nwaba to stay. I think having him on the roster is super important. But also, David Nwaba and his trade value might be higher than it's ever been. And you might have to take advantage of that. He's not untouchable in my books.
Yeah, definitely, especially with contenders. This is about the time where you kind of get a good feel of if you need to add other pieces. Like you see Brooklyn, they're kind of making moves because they're like, all right, we have some holes and the best time to fill it is right now so we can get to the All-Star break and kind of mesh towards the playoffs. I think if he finishes the season as a Rocket without being traded, then you 100% bring him back, because I believe it was you that was saying, I don't remember for sure, but I believe it was you that was saying Houston, they no longer are relying on outscoring their opponent. They're more so
their opponent. Yeah.
And I think
a big part of that.
Yeah, definitely. And moving forward in the future, that's the kind of guy that you want if you want defense to be your focus, because a team that can play great defense, they can beat nearly anybody as long as they're also able to score the ball. Mm-hmm. So I 100% think he comes back.
I think, one team that I think Nwaba would be a great fit for? Utah. Mm-hmm. I think Utah would be a really good fit for Nwaba. They need the one piece they need is a defender, someone that can defend opposing guards, and make sure they don't go off. And David Nwaba could perfectly fit that role, in my opinion. And I think if they find a way to jettison Bogdanovich and they some combination, but if you take Bogdanovich out of that core and you put in Nwaba, mm-hmm. I think they're they have enough offense, with Jordan Clarkson and Donovan and even Joe Ingles, guys that can kind of take over that load. And even David Nwaba can produce some offense from time to time, but he's a far better defender than Bogdanovich is. And I think that could be a move that really puts Utah in that scary zone. So honestly, Nwaba should have some suitors at the deadline, and the Rockets should listen. The only players I'm hanging up on you are Christian Wood and Sean Tate, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And the Jazz, it's weird with the Jazz. I expected them to be good last year, and they weren't all that. I mean, they were a good team, but they weren't what people were projecting them to be, one of the better teams in the conference. It ended up being really a 2-team race between the Lakers and Clippers, but the Clippers, mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But this year they are scary good. It's crazy how well they're meshing and how well they're gelling.
I think the answer to that question of who Nwaba had that block on was, according to Grant, it was Tyrese Maxey. So, a guard. We were right. We were in the ballpark.
We were close.
And I mean, now when it comes to the Rockets, though, honestly, I'm a little worried about Sterling Brown. It did not look very good tonight at that injury. And hopefully he isn't out for too long, because the last thing the Rockets need right now is another injury. Sterling Brown, I mean, he played 26 minutes. Did he come back from that injury?
No, that was the last time he was on the floor.
So he played 26 minutes. He played 26 minutes and then got hurt.
At least I don't remember.
I didn't think he came back, but
I don't remember.
Because that fourth quarter group, Macklemore was playing a lot in the fourth quarter. So there's So yeah, Sterling Brown left the game with 4:37 in the fourth. So we did come back.
Oh, he came back in?
I think so. Yeah. But I mean, maybe like he came back, and usually like I know Sterling Brown is a guy that would probably play through an injury. And to knowing the Rockets are shorthanded tonight and they were down as much, I feel like Sterling Brown kind of knew that he was needed tonight. And, maybe because you know how ankles are, it happens in the moment, but then you really find out how bad it is the next day. And after you kind of sleep on it and how swollen it becomes. So honestly, I hope that it's fine. Because like I remember Nwaba had like an injury like that, and he was out for like 2 games in Oklahoma City at the beginning of the month. And obviously Christian Wood had his injury against the Suns earlier this year. So honestly, yeah, for me, Sterling Brown is needed because at this point you don't really got too many other players. Eric Gordon played tonight hurt. John Wall should be on this injury report. He won't play either Friday or Saturday. But yeah, it's just like it's tough. It's tough because it's honestly it's tough watching these games. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I was like, I mean I love watching the Rockets and I love watching basketball. Don't get me wrong, but to see this team as hurt as it is, it's hard to really grade them or critique them because they're not playing as they were intended to be.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been like that the whole season. 28 games now. The Rockets have still not had the team. I think they've had 1 game or 2 games where they've had a fully healthy team. And I think it was like the Portland game, right? Like the Washington, I think it was against the Wizards the first time. And I think it was against Portland.
That sounds about right.
And both of those games were wins. So, yeah, to me, it's so hard to look at this team and say, yes, you are, good, you are bad, because we haven't seen this team really fully there yet. And the thing is, when eventually these players do come back, it's going to be time to trade them. And then we see another reshuffling of the deck. And to be honest, this year we're not going to get a full look at the Rockets. And that's okay because at least we're not wasting a year of a contending window. I guess that's like the one good thing about it. Like you look at teams like a team that's like the Bucks. The Bucks are struggling right now, and I'm sure COVID has to do with it. And honestly, the Bucks don't look like the team they were a year ago. The Heat, also another team that is kind of, not playing up to their potential this year. So you have teams that are kind of dogging it, and COVID has been a real, it's a letdown for a lot of teams, and it's wasting a year in their contender windows.
Yeah, it's rough
because they don't have James Harden, but that's another story for another day. The J train's pulling into the station, Ray, so I'll get one key from you for Friday against Dallas should the game be played.
I think John Wall coming with that same assertiveness that he had in the fourth quarter is a big key, because right now this team desperately needs somebody who's going to just take over the game. And in that fourth quarter, they was kind of using him like John Wall, and it wasn't so much isolation, but a lot of the possessions were ending with the ball either in his hand, hitting a 3, attacking the rim, or dishing to an open teammate. And I think it's rough because he's coming off of injuries, but right now they need that from him without Christian Wood. So I think as long as John Wall plays, for one, but definitely an assertive John Wall.
Yeah. So in their last 7 games, the Mavericks have given up 115 points or more. So if you're going to win this game, you're going to win because you're outscoring. It's going to be a scoring game. Whoever first to 130 wins. And Dallas is going to take advantage of that. And look, if John Wall doesn't play, this game is a total punt. And maybe you just try again on Saturday. But honestly, this game is winnable just because we've seen the Rockets offense play really well against Dallas already this year. So and honestly, a lot of that game had a lot of the same passion that the end of this game did. So let's continue this rhythm that the Rockets built in the fourth quarter tonight and apply it on Friday. And I think that's a good place to park the rocket ship for now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Dream Take. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at The Dream Take, nothing fancy. And you can also follow The Dream Shake on Twitter at Dream Shake SBN. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast in your podcast app of choice and download our episodes. We go live after some games during the season, but we give you a post-game recap after every game this season on demand. So be sure to subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. And be sure to also follow my co-pilot tonight, Mr. Raymond Lucas, on Twitter at...
There we go. Raymond Lucas Jr.
Raymond Lucas Jr. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Brener, JeremyBrener. Be sure to also check out all of our content from The Dream Shake at thedreamshake.com, home of all things Houston Rockets at SBNation.com. Thank you so much for everyone that's tuned in. And until next time, go Rockets.